Joining us now is senior political writer for Politico, Jonathan Martin. Jonathan, thanks for being with us.
Hey, Senator, thanks for having me.
I was just looking over a little biographical data here, Jonathan, and it says here that Martin enjoys C-SPAN, thumbing through random sections of what it takes, reading profiles of obscure House members in the almanac of American politics.
Michael Brown thanks you.
Jonathan, where did it all go wrong, son?
That was a bio for our website. That's what I wrote on a log. I can tell you that my interests also extend to college football, and perhaps one of the most fun days that I had covering the campaign, Senator, for the past 2 years was the day that your bus tour in Florida wound up at the Swamp for the Florida-Tennessee game.
Oh, well, listen, we wound up in several swamps down there, but that was a football stadium for you uninitiated. Wasn't that great? You know,
it was a fun day.
I used any excuse that I could to get to a football game. I kept telling the staff, look at all those people out there. I said, yeah, but you're setting up in a box, you're not meeting the people. I said, well, I'll wave,
That was a good day for Tim Tebow and a bad day for the Volunteers.
Oh, it was a long day.
That's what's wrong with Iowa. He didn't have any football teams there in Iowa.
Well, didn't have any I was interested in. Jonathan,
yes, sir.
Let me ask you a very probing, in-depth question.
Yes, sir.
What's going to happen tonight?
Well, I think you're going to see the president try and get more specific and try and grab the reins on this thing and try and get to the point where he can get a bill to his desk to sign. Now, look, I think the conventional wisdom is that he's going to sign something. Now, the question is just exactly what that's going to be. Is there going to be a public option there or not? I mean, increasingly it seems like the Senate is not going to pass a bill that includes the public option. So this is increasingly going to be a sort of intra-Democratic party story, and it's going to be a test of can this president really sort of get his party in a room and try and hash something out and sign a bill.
I just don't see what this speech adds to it. If it's the way you and I and most people think it's going to be. But let me ask you about the strategy. Is the strategy, you think, okay, we'll let Pelosi pass hers with a public option if she can,
right,
and we'll let the Senate pass something, probably without the public option, then get it to conference, and that's where we'll do our work and call it a victory, whatever happens?
I think that's what it sounds like is going to happen. On the first pass through, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here, but on the first pass through, the House probably does vote it with a public option. The Senate, I'm not sure what version they'll pass, but it may or may not have one. But ultimately, to get a final bill passed out of the Senate to get to the president's desk, it's tough to see with all those moderate Democrats from red states that there's going to be a bill that has a public option. Now, here's the political cover. They include the so-called trigger that would basically provide so there's not a public option immediately, but there's language in there that would create one down the road. Now, what that does, that may bring enough moderate Democrats in the Senate over and give the House liberals the cover politically to say, well, yes, there is a public option in there.
That ain't going to work.
Compromise.
That ain't going to work. What do you think, Jerry?
I don't think it's going to work. Jonathan, here's my question.
Yes,
why it seems like this is supposed to be, or at least they tout it, the advisors tout it, and I'm sure they're whispering in your ear and not mine, but he's going to lay out a plan. He's going to come out and be forceful. Axelrod's taking, more of a stand here is sort of the liaison other than where Rahm Emanuel was before.
Right.
And yet he comes out and says, but I'm open to new ideas. Well, we've had this time where he's supposed to be open to this new ideas. Isn't this the time where he's supposed to stand up there and be presidential and actually have a plan with details?
I think you're going to see more detail tonight, and I think you're going to start to see him try and create sort of not his own bill necessarily, but something that he wants to see in a final bill. I think a lot of folks think that he opened the door for so much criticism this past summer by not being more specific and by not offering his own plan. Instead, you had 5 different plans out there from both chambers of Congress, which made it so easy for opponents to treat it like a piñata. So I think you're going to start to see him get more specific. Now, whether or not that's going to really change any minds among Republicans or even some Democrats, I think remains to be seen. But again, this is increasingly going to be a contest, a sort of Democratic family argument, and it's going to be a really fascinating fight to watch here for the next few weeks.
You know, Tony Blankley had an interesting article in the Washington Times today. He says this is like 1990 when George H.W. Bush went back on his no new taxes pledge and struck a compromise. He was talking about Leon Panetta at the time, who was carrying the ball in the House. And the position that the Republicans were in. The Republicans didn't want to vote for it.
That's right.
And yet they were told, for the good of the party, in this case, the good of the country.
Yeah.
They sit down and cap and trade. They didn't like how that felt, having it shoved down their throats.
Well, I'm talking about 1990 now.
I know, but I'm relating it to now, where they've already sort of had that feeling. And I don't think they're going to want to do that again.
Well, and you bring up a fascinating point. If you consider the stimulus, if you consider the energy bill, which, keep in mind, passed the House but hasn't been brought up to the floor of the Senate yet, but if you include the stimulus and the energy bill, and now you're talking about health care, that's three really tough votes. If you're a House moderate, if you're from a Tennessee, if you're like a Bart Gordon or a John Tanner, or if you're from like an Arkansas, I mean, that's a tough trio of votes right there, and especially if you have to go home and defend that. So there are similarities to 1990 where these members want to be loyal to their president, but at the same time, they're looking out for their own hide, and that's a darn tough vote to take.
And they wound up passing it, and Bill Clinton was elected the president.
And George H.W. Bush got a primary too.
Yeah, that's right.
Jonathan, I've got a question. I'm sure you're hearing stuff that we don't hear. Tell us something that we don't know. I say that at the risk of sounding like Chris Matthews.
Oh my goodness.
Something
or a prediction for us.
A prediction. I think the Republicans could win both governors' races this fall, and whether or not
you're saying both as in New Jersey and Virginia.
Correct. And I think that there are a lot of folks that think that there are similarities between this year and 1993, when, of course, they did the same thing in Jersey and Virginia, and, of course, that sort of presaged 1994. So I would keep an eye on those two races. It's the only game in town politically this fall, but I think both of them are going to be felt sort of nationally because of the proximity in Virginia and also because of what's happening in Jersey with
jumping ahead a little bit. What about Chris Dodd?
Well, look, if the race was held today, he'd be in a very tough spot. But time is on his side. He's got some time to try and help himself politically. So it's a long way away.
I saw where he's going to keep the banking committee.
Yeah.
What would be your idea as to why he might have done that?
Well, I think I know what you're getting at. It may have something to do with the strong PACs that happen to fund members.
Oh, you're a cynical man, Jonathan.
So much for the memory of Teddy Kennedy and passing that forward.
That may have something to do with it. But look, if he was facing the voters this fall, he'd be in a world of hurt. It's a blue state. We'll see where he is next year. Who knows between now and then what's going to happen.
Jonathan, thank you very, very much for being with us again.
Senator, thanks for having me.
Insightful as usual.